Alright guys, I hope you're doing great. I'm gonna cut right to the chase and tell you that today we're gonna talk about the 70-300mm lens from Fujifilm. We're gonna compare it to other alternatives from Fuji. I'm gonna share with you my story with this lens and overall just give you my 2 cents about it. Let's proceed. Before we start, I'd like to mention that this is not a sponsored video. However, the guys over at F64 were kind enough to lend this lens to me in order to test it out. F64 is the biggest photography-oriented store in Bucharest, and even before this, I bought all my gear from them, and I can definitely vouch for their professionalism, and they are very client-oriented. So maybe check them out sometime. Okay, let's just have a quick look inside so that you know what to expect inside the box. And the lens itself, beautiful classic Fuji design, and also it's quite compact and light for 300mm, although admittedly that is in part because the entire body is made out of plastic, but it doesn't feel toyish or cheap in any way. Of course, it stops being so compact when you zoom in, but speaking of, the zoom ring is quite tight and secure. And if you want to get specific about it, it's about 14 centimeters long, about 21 when fully extended. And if you choose to mount the hood as well, things are quickly headed towards 30 centimeters. Present on this body is also the much beloved aperture ring. And the focus ring is very smooth, nothing to complain about here. On the front element, we see some initials that symbolize the fact that this lens has an aperture ring, it has a linear motor, it is optically stabilized, it is weather resistant, and it has a 67 filter thread size. At the lens mount, if you notice that gap inside, that is because this lens is compatible with one of Fuji's teleconverters, which will effectively double your focal range. The weather resistant markings, the aperture control switch between automatic and ring controlled, the minimum focal distance switch, and a lock button in order to prevent zoom creeping. Alright, I think it's safe to say that you are more interested in what kind of results and images you can achieve with this lens than how it looks and feels like and how much it weighs. So let's take a look. But right off the bat, I can tell you that this really impressed me, and now I kinda want one. But to give you some context, I had this for over a week and I got to test it over the last weekend especially, and my plan was to go in the heart of Romania, in the mountains, in the forests, and find myself some bears to test it on. By that I mean I found a bear observatory and I made a reservation. The observatory was built by Matei Bence, who is a Hungarian photographer pretty famous in the world of wildlife and nature photographers. However, that's not what ended up happening, but yeah, let's not get ahead of ourselves. On the first day, I got to visit the St. Anne Lake, which is the only volcanic lake in Romania and one of the very few in Europe. Very nice place, very overcrowded as well, but I guess that gave me more subjects to photograph, right? And one of the most intriguing ones was this amazingly beautiful owl. So we can analyze this a bit further. I'm not extremely happy with the framing because I cut her claws in some of them, but others are decent, let's say. But besides that, we can see the level of detail and sharpness this lens has across the focal range. I didn't do any clarity or details enhancements. Side note, the edges will always be a bit softer than the center, but that doesn't really matter with such zoom lenses. Also, we can see the background blur, which is really not bad. The subject separation is nice and quite smooth. The 70-300 has a minimum focus distance of 83 centimeters, which is also not bad at all, considering how much you can zoom in, and also considering the fact that Fuji doesn't really have that many macro lenses. This can do that as well. You can really close in on a subject, and the separation from the subject and the background and the bokeh is really quite pleasant to me. Okay, so if you are in the market to buy a zoom lens from Fuji, you've probably done your homework already, or you're about to, and you've checked what other zoom lenses they have, which is the best fit for you, you know? And let me quickly glance over your options, really. I think what you could pick for a lens is the 55-200, the 70-300, which is this one, you know. And in my opinion, this one completely replaces the 55-200. It's only $100 more, 700 versus 800. It also comes with extra features like weather sealing and a lot more range. So yeah, I think this completely eliminates the 55-200, at least from my equation. I don't know, but I'm still putting it on the list, of course. Then you have the 50-140, which is a 2.8 aperture lens, which means it's a lot faster than this. It's a red badge lens. And its price tag is matching all those impressive specs as well. It's $1,600 and it weighs a lot more. It's 1 kilo. By the way, I forgot to mention, this comes at 580 grams and it's exactly the same weight of the 55-200, further proving my point of replacing it completely. Then you have the 100-400 millimeters lens, which is obviously a nice range to have, but it comes at $1,900, which is more expensive than the camera itself, and comes at 1.4 kilos, and it's quite long and big. So yeah, definitely some drawbacks there, but at least you have options, you know. Other than that, I have to mention this 70-300 is one of only 4 lenses from Fuji which accepts a teleconverter from them. For example, the 2x teleconverter, which effectively doubles your focal range. So from 300 millimeters you will have 600, but in full frame equivalent that is 900 actually. So that is a massive reach. However, I can see at least one reason why you might not want to choose the 70-300, and that is the fact that it starts at 70, and many times you might want to use something wider than that, and in that case you will have to change your lens, and that is never a particularly fun activity. So having something like the 50-140 is much more versatile, I'd say, and sometimes you might get away with not having to change your lens. A repeating theme you'll hear and see from me in this video is just how nice it is to have so much reach. The 70-300 has a full frame equivalent range of 105-450 millimeters. You can really zoom in on your subject and isolate it, having a completely different perspective than before. Maybe you want to show the scale of a place and show it wide, but maybe you don't, and you can single in on one subject. Also, that allows you to create many more photographs from the same location, basically, because you're showing completely different things in each image. The road to this place was, for the most part, quite a joy. A destination in itself along the way was this amazing road which snakes its way up the mountain. The area is quite rural, with haystacks and storks making nests, definitely worth a visit. But to get back to my initial plans, so the meetup for the Bear Observatory was in the evening at golden hour, basically, and I go there quite early even, and I wait and I wait. I thought I'm just early, you know, but long story short, I was waiting in the wrong location due to some miscommunication, and I basically missed it, the entire you know, opportunity. And venturing into the forest where you know there are bears with just your camera and by yourself didn't seem like the smartest thing to do. So yeah. And anyway, then I found another couple who were like myself waiting in another location, so I guess I wasn't the only one, at least. But yeah, needless to say, I was pretty disappointed after this. If you remember, this was my entire idea, my entire reason why I drove for like 400 kilometers to go to this place to find some bears, you know. And due to some silly mistake, yeah, it's not happening, you know. So I started heading back to the nearest town, and then I realized it's golden hour and things tend to look pretty nice in that light, of course, as we very well know. And I kind of abandoned my initial plans and you know, stopped the car on the edge of the road and just started taking some photos, and some of them I quite like. Or I even got a baby hawk or something similar. I don't know, maybe one of you can tell me what the kind of bird this is. But initially I thought it's a crow on a haystack. Even more proof that this really zooms in much more than my naked eye can see. So one point I guess I could take from this is to not focus so much on what plans you made and what shots you need to get, and just enjoy it, especially if we're talking about photography, you know. I've mainly relied on the autofocus for the entire duration of the trip, and it's great, it's very snappy. And on top of that, it's a linear motor, which, especially if you are manually focusing, you will really appreciate that. Maybe the only thing I have to mention is sometimes when I was at 300 millimeters, the autofocus was getting a bit slower, especially in the darker situations, but I guess that's very normal behavior. And especially if you don't switch the focus distance to a minimum of 5 meters, because if you do, it will have less work to do and should really become, you know, snappier and faster. For the stabilization, I have a particularly challenging test, and that is my black cat, because it implies a long exposure time, and it did great. It's very sharp at 1/5 of a second of exposure time, handheld. And if you need more technical stuff than a black cat, well, Fuji says 5.5 stops of image stabilization, so there's that as well, but I'll take the cat. For video as well, it works great. I was hand-holding at 300 millimeters and not even being too careful about it, and the footage is pretty smooth, I'd say. Which brings me to my next captured footage. So this was the second day. I was heading back to the lake because I wanted to fly my drone. I didn't the first time because I didn't have any time, and also there were way too many people. So I was going back there to get some aerial views, some photos of the lake, you know. And then on the road, specifically on the edge of the road, this appears. quite a big bear. And I was really excited, of course, because I didn't think I'll see any in the end, and got to take some footage and a few photos, and that made me quite happy and feel like the trip wasn't wasted. Actually, I think some of the photos I managed to take are even more intimate than they would have been at the observatory, because remember, the observatory has a one-way glass, so the bear doesn't see you, but you can see it perfectly. Where here, it could see me very well and was sometimes staring directly at me in the camera. So I managed to take these portraits of a bear, which I'm pretty happy with. I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously the quality of the photos and variety would have been much nicer at the observatory, even if only for the sole reason that it was golden hour, so the light would have been beautiful. And you know, you get to watch the bears in their natural habitat without a care in the world, and they don't know you're there, so they just act naturally. But anyway, I made the best of my situation, and having this lens was crucial because I couldn't get as close as I did without having it, without risking my own safety, because I was in the car obviously, and I had my foot on the gas in case the bear was gonna change its mind about being so lovely, which it was. It was quite lovely, and if you take a look at these photos, it looks quite sweet, and it kind of breaks your heart, and it's obvious that people got it used to come here, and they probably feed him, and that's obviously something which you really shouldn't do. And yeah, this brings me to my next topic, which is, I know people want to take photos, some people even want to take selfies with bears. Yeah, don't do that, and don't feed bears. They may look fluffy and cute and all, but they are dangerous animals after all. So if you want to see them, go to an observatory, go to a sanctuary. We have one of the biggest ones here in Romania as well. So there are options, because remember that any interaction between bears and humans can be deadly for one or the other. You don't know. So I hope I convinced you by now by my own beliefs, and that is that the 70-300 is nothing to scoff at. It might have a, let's say, an entry-level price point, at least compared to the red badge lenses from Fuji, but it can really trade blows with them easily. It's a complete package and offers so many things and features and performance at this price point, which in my opinion makes it the best value Fuji zoom lens to date, offering brilliant performance across the range, and especially at 300, which is really something you might want from a zoom lens to be able to do. Having weather sealing, image stabilization, being so compact and light, unless you're really invested in that kind of photography, which would require a specialized red badge telephoto lens from Fuji, like the 50-140 or 100-400 millimeters, which imply extra cost, extra weight, extra size and bulk in your travel bag. It's really hard to justify for me, and to me it's a no-brainer. This is the lens to get. Hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I will see you in the next one.